Hello, hello, hello. All right. So hopefully the stream is working again. I'm not 100% confident with this. Let me put my headset on. So, yeah, in the last stream, I was working on the level design and playing around with a procedural building generation tool that I got for free on the marketplace. And it turns out, yeah, it was rather difficult to use. So during the entire stream, it was trying to figure out which assets I could use and getting them set up to be working with the tool. But then yesterday, I spent some time actually working on working with the tool more. And yeah, I, for the life of me, can't really get it working in a way that makes it easier. So I just decided, you know what, screw it. I'll just make something really simple on my own. So that's what we're going to be going over today. So I'm going to attempt to make a ridiculously simple procedural building generator. And maybe I will expand it, you know, as time goes on to be a little bit more than, you know, a basic block placement tool. But yeah, so that's what we're going to do today. So today I am actually in the L.A.P.D project. And I've got a folder called test assets that I've just been using to block out the environments. So maybe I'll show you that. Give everybody a chance to join the stream if they want to do so. So this is the city block-in that I put together. And I started with a sketch, actually. I wonder if I can find that. Let's see. Where did I put it? These are all... Did I put it in concepts? I did too. What's the difference between the ping and the JPEG? Ah, that's a screenshot. Okay, so this was the original sketch I did on paper. And then I just went through and numbered the buildings, so it was easier for me to follow. Yeah, so anyways, I like to always start with a a simple sketch just to kind of, you know, get an idea out of my head. And yeah, working on graph paper makes it a lot easier to, you know, get a consistent scale out of it. So this was just me thinking up a layout. I wanted to make sure that there weren't too many really long sight lines. So there's always like a building blocking your line of sight at some point. So that way people aren't able to snipe across the whole map. I mean, granted, that all gets thrown out the window as soon as you start jetpacking on top of the buildings. But anyways, so I guess I can hit play. Now, wait a second. I don't have my headphones plugged in here. It's on my speakers. Well, that's not going to sound good. All right. So this is an example of spawning in the blue base. And hopefully you guys can actually still hear me through all these sound effects. I've set up this stream OBS to automatically pitch the volume down when I'm talking. And I'm just going to assume that that's actually working. But this is an idea of the layout of the map. Eventually these will all become buildings. And between the red side and the blue side, I think I'm going to go for like a different visual, like you're entering a different district. So one side will be like, you know, kind of ghetto and abandoned buildings and destroyed environment. And then I'm thinking the other side will be like cyberpunk aesthetic. At least that's the idea for now. But yeah, so it's a mirror image, obviously, in order to make it fair. In the center area, though, it's not mirrored. So there is a strip in the middle, which I'll show you guys from a top view later. But there is a strip in the middle which isn't quite perfectly mirrored. And then there's these underground tunnels, which lead to the centralized capture point, which is going to be underground. So the building we ran through along the elevated road there, you come into the center of it, and this is going to be a capture point. And then, of course, it comes back out inside of the blue base area. So that's going over to red base again. And this will take us out into the equivalent place in the blue base. And these are going to be, I don't know, some sort of like parking garage type building at some point. But yeah, that's a basic preview. So as I was saying, if we look at the split down the middle here, so they're mirrored. Let's turn off my dome here. They're a mirrored image, both horizontally and vertically. So you get these buildings on opposite corners to each other. And then this strip in the middle is slightly different. So you've got the entrance to the underground tunnels on both sides here, but the buildings on each side are slightly different. And then you got the central tower in the middle. So that is a quick preview. And I'm just going to get on with it now. It looks like I'm streaming alone, but that's okay. I didn't really give much time before I started the stream. And maybe someone will join me along the way. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just start a new level. And then I am going to create a folder, and I'm going to call this blueprints. And I'm going to create a blueprint actor that I'm going to call BP underscore approc gen building. I'm just going to call it proc gen building. I was going to call it proc gen building simple, but it might not stay simple. So save that. Let's open it up, and we're just going to jump straight into the construction script. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a for loop. And then we're going to create a duplicate of that, because we're essentially just going to place the meshes down procedurally. So the last index here is going to be the number of floors. So I'll start that on 4. And I'll promote that to available, a variable, not an available, floors. And I'm going to expose that so we can change it. Plug that in there. And then this one is going to be how wide you want it to be. I'm just going to call this let's do 4x6 actually, just so we can see some distinction, or maybe 4x8. And promote that to a variable, and we're going to call this columns, because they're going to be like vertical columns. And then here we are going to static mesh. Add a static mesh component. And we're actually going to set this to be static instead of movable by default, because anytime you add a mesh to a blueprint, by default it's set to movable. And we're going to split this here and split that there. And then over here, we're going to choose set mesh. And what are we going to use for our mesh? So let's take a look. So I brought in the assets that I was working with. Let's load up the maps here. So abandoned city exterior, and yes, I want to save all that. Oh, right, because I started a new map and then didn't save it. Oh, big stretch. And of course it has to compile shaders, but let's see what that looks like at 1 frame per second while it happens. This really is a gorgeous city pack. It's a shame that it's so poorly optimized. Each one of these buildings has numerous and these are just prefab buildings, so they're not made with modular pieces. So the downside to this is the mesh itself is probably, you know, upwards of 200,000 polys. And then, oh, that was actually rather fast. So let's take a look at one of these buildings. So 150,000 polys, right? Which is not terrible. 100,000 polys seems to be, you know, the number of polys for a single character in current gen games. But 34 material slots. That means that you are actually taking 153,000 polys and multiplying it by 34 for how expensive this is. Because for each new material slot, you're actually adding a different draw call. So this is insanely inefficient, but nicely detailed. So at some point, because I like the look of these buildings, I'm probably actually going to export these into a modeling package and then retexture them. Essentially, convert all of them to using maybe two textures, windows, and I don't even know if actually I would need two textures though, because the windows aren't, these aren't buildings that you can go inside, right? They're inside, it's just a mess. So, yeah, anyways, I'm gonna retexture these at some point so that I can use them without losing quality. I tried going through the process of actually making them using Unreal's tools to actually atlas all of the textures together, and it just looks like a blurred mess because there's just way too many textures. There's 36 different textures, and they're all probably at 2 or 4K by the looks of it. So there's just too much to cram into one texture atlas. But anyways, so this one, we do have like some windows. It's hard to see. Let's get all my SM buildings here. There we go. SM building 1 through 57. Hide those and we'll see the actual modular pieces here. So we got something like this. Let's see. Those aren't actually windows. Of course not. This whole scene here is just kind of kit bashed together in a very very individual way. So none of these windows are actually assembled windows. They're just all separate mesh pieces. So doesn't make it easy. Okay, so maybe let's take a look at. So we got the abandoned city there, and then we got Cyberpunk City, which I like. Let's take a look at that. Let's don't save that map. Loading, loading, loading. So much fun. It's funny, I don't think it matters how much RAM, how much CPU power you have, how large your GPU is. Loading always takes forever in Unreal Engine. I've been working with the engine since 2009, I think, and it doesn't matter how much technology is advanced and how much more powerful my systems get, it still takes a long while. All right. So again, compiling shaders. Oh, 9,000 of them this time. So it is going to take a minute. But we got some cool assets here. I like these buildings with the little outcrops. That's kind of cool. So let's take a look inside the models folder. See if we can find props. Oh, that is actual props. Like maybe structure then. Like signs and whatnot. Buildings. CB, CY, HT. Wow, these are really well named so you can understand what you're looking at. TA1. Sure, let's go for TA1. We'll see what that is. So do any of these look like a repeatable? That one here looks like a window, as it says. Okay, that could give us a cool building facade anyways. Let's use this one. So we're going to browse to that. And while the shaders are compiling, I will continue working on my procedural tool here, and then we can take a look at the environment. Can you guys tell that I have ADHD? I like to jump around while I'm working. I don't ever stick to one train of thought for very long. Okay, so we've got the number of floors and then the number of columns here. We're adding our static mesh. We're going to save this actually. We're going to promote that to a variable and we'll just call this a wall mesh for now. Even though really it's a window mesh. And then what we want to do is we want to specify our transform detail here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to get the bounds of the mesh. And so the bounds of the mesh are actually giving you, they're going to return the scale of the mesh, but it's actually divided by 2 with the box extent. So essentially it's throwing a box around the shape of the mesh and then telling us what half of the width, what half of any dimension is actually. So we're going to split that into X, Y, Z. And we're going to multiply these. So we're going to get float times float. And we're going to grab this and we're going to multiply that integer by float. And we're going to do the same thing over here. So the columns is essentially setting up the width, which is X. And the floors are setting up the Z value, so the height of the building. So we're going to multiply both of these by 2, and that's just to get us our actual width and height of the mesh piece. And the reason we're doing this is because rather than setting values, is because this is dynamic. So if we swap out the mesh, it's going to recalculate these values for us automatically, and then you don't have to worry about typing in the dimensions and figuring out what the dimensions are on your own, because you can actually hover over here and you see it says approximate size 600 by 113 by 900. So I'm guessing 900 is the Z and 600 is the X and 113 is the Y. So rather than having to type those values in manually, this is just doing the calculation automatically. So if we swap out a different mesh, it'll fit too. So we're going to multiply that value. So this one here, oops, so I'm doing this wrong. This one here is the Z, because we're starting with the number of floors and then we're going into the number of columns, or how wide it is. So we're going to multiply those together and these together. And we're going to plug that into the Z, and we're going to plug this into the X, and that should theoretically give us the right position. So now if I compile and save that, let's do another ADHD moment and take a look at this city. Yeah, that looks kind of cool. So these, I think, are distant buildings. Yeah, they look ugly when you get up close, but from a distance they look good. And then these are the main buildings themselves. So we've got these guys, and I'm guessing these outcrops are actually like a wall deco separate piece. Probably somewhere in the building. Well, somewhere in here, front. Let's see, construct front. Doesn't tell you anything about the mesh. Anyways, I'm not going to dive into that too far. I could type in mesh here. Yeah. I'm not going to try and look at someone else's blueprint and figure it out in a couple of seconds on stream. These ones look really cool too, though. So, anyways, we'll start with this and we'll go from there. So, if I go back to my new level and I go back to my procedural building and I drag that in. Oh, yeah, we can see it's already working. Wow. That's rather large. But functional. So you can now specify, we can turn off mesh there. Oh, and we need to go back in and turn on the number of columns and the mesh itself. Excuse me. And looks like all of this is working. So I'm just going to clean this up a wee bit. That's all relatively clean. Bring that in. Maybe throw that up here. I don't know why I waste time on things like this, but makes it easier for future me when I come back. If everything's a little bit cleaner and contained in one spot. So yeah, so essentially all this is doing is we're getting our mesh, we're checking what the bounds of it are, we're multiplying the box extent by 2 so that we get the actual dimensions for the width and height. Then we're running a for loop, and inside of that for loop we're nesting another for loop. So inside of this one, it's saying we're going to create the number of floors, and that's using our default value of 4. So it's saying it's going to place 4 of these vertically. And the way that we're getting the vertical dimension is we're getting the size of the mesh in the Z and plugging that into the Z location of our static mesh. And then inside of that loop, we're also doing the columns, which are these vertical rows here. And we're offsetting that by the X of the mesh. So for each one of the columns, we're adding a new one along the X-axis. And then that gives us the ability to, oh, and I just realized I can skew these values and you won't see them. Let's do this. Bring that over here. Whoops. Bring that over here. And we can just test this way. So as I drag out, oh wait, I was on the wrong screen. So as we drag out here, we get a varying height. And I'm just realizing my face is blocking like half of that. So we get a varying height. So that's only 1 floor. Interesting. That feels like 2 floors. Because it's, I guess maybe that's just the mesh itself. Oh yeah, because it's got 2 windows there. And then we could swap this mesh out. So if I minimize that and we go back into a Cyberpunk City buildings, and let's see if we go into WA and WA windows, and we bring my viewport back up so we can see it, and we plug that in there. Whoa, this is a giant mofo. And it looks like there's a tiniest little gap. There is the tiniest little gap in between. So I wonder how I could fix that. And I wonder if that's just the mesh is not aligned to the grid, probably. But it's calculating the dimension dynamically, so you think it would get, even if it's not on the grid, you think it would get the exact precise measurement. But possibly Yeah, 1901. Why would you do that? 1 pixel. 1 unit, rather, not 1 pixel. Um, so let's go into source meshes from UE for Cyberpunk City. And this guy, oh, you bastard. Oh, it's WA. It's in the name. WA. Windows. Save. We're going to get the vertex color. We're going to take the collision 2 because it's somewhat helpful sometimes. Let's see, with this one though. Yeah, I was going to say it's just a box. So we don't need the collision specifically. But yeah, so that's that's the beginnings anyways of a procedural tool. We can adjust the number of floors dynamically, and we can adjust the number of 0. Oh, right. 0. I know what I did there. Let's reset these values, and we can fix that. I want to run this for floors -1 and plug that there. And columns, what? This is why I usually leave the cleanup for the end. Columns -1, plug that in there. And that will actually give us real world values, so we don't have 0 floors and have 1. And that's why it seemed bigger. It seemed like there was 2 when there was only 1. Because there was in the last one. And if I put it to 0, it goes away. So then I can, number of floors here. The slider range will do 1 to whatever, and value range 1. And that way we're setting our minimum so we can't ever crank it down to 0. So if I save that and we go back here, we're going to be able to go infinitely high, but we can't go below 1 here on the slider. So that just saves the artist from screwing things up. But yeah, so this is just for a facade of a building. Now, obviously, I want to play with this more and add some randomization. And I'm just realizing I think the lighting in this environment is backwards. Let's get rid of that sphere, because it looks ugly, and I like setting my lighting to be movable just from the get-go until it comes to baking in the details. And I was going to rotate that around, but now that I turned on the skylight, don't quite need to. I'm going to bring that back over onto my second monitor. So yeah, you know, theoretically speaking, and actually it's interesting where, oh, I thought I had that selected. I was going to say it's interesting where the pivot is. Nope, that was the sun. So we can bring this here, and we could also rotate it 90 degrees. Throw that onto this end. Yeah, and this is where you get, you got to make sure your meshes all line up to the right unit. So the meshes we work with would have to be very specific. But yeah, it would be a quick way to do some simple building facades. Now, where I'm going to have to do some more research is trying to adjust the shape of this, because a city full of square buildings is really ugly and boring. So I wouldn't want them to all be square. So I'm going to play around with whether or not I can do some of this kind of looping along a spline. So if I can get the floor shaped out with a spline and then loop up the number of floors, I think that would give us the best results. But this is kind of just a test on the theory of how you could simply be adjusting the number of floors and the width of the building. So my next theory is I often will, let's see if I already did that. I feel like I did already do that, but where did they go if I didn't already have a blueprints folder? Test assets. Haha! I just put them directly in the root folder. Because I was going to say, I already made some blueprints for splines. So if we drag this here, so this is the spline mesh, and the idea I have here is as I oh, this is interesting. As I create a spline, this is trying to extend the mesh cube along the spline, but I see that it's not working with more than 2 points. But I have made some tools in the past, for example, for roads and stuff like that, where you can get the mesh to extrude along the spline as opposed to just going with the width and the height. So then we could shape out a building's floor using that, and then use loops to create the number of floors that we want. So that's probably what I'm going to work on next time. So considering that I need to do a lot more research, I think I am basically just going to... Oh, hey, Puntak, sorry, I didn't notice you joined the stream. I need to add like an alert to chat messages or something, because I realized it's just silent chatting. So now I still haven't found the best place to put my chat. Ideally it would be here, but that's on my working monitors, and right now it's on my tablet down below. So either I'm looking over to the left or the right, or I'm looking down, which is less than ideal. But anyways, you're here to see the game design, not my ugly face. Thank you. I am happy that you're excited. And don't worry, as early as all of this stuff looks, as I said, it's going to come together a lot more quickly. Man, there's gaps all over the place with these meshes. It's got a tiny little 1 unit gap in there too. Have to clean that up. But yeah, as I said, I'm not sure if you guys are all aware of the previous version of the project that I had put together, but I worked on the project for a year before Pseudo joined as a programmer, and we decided to shift our focus over to multiplayer. So this is just really going through creating some tools to help me flesh out the level design for the multiplayer faster. So originally I was going to be using a tool called Dungeon Architect to do completely procedural environments. And well, my original thought was what I was going to do is I was going to handcraft some city blocks and then use the Dungeon Architect to randomly lay out a city with my handcrafted city blocks. And so that was going to be great for, you know, a campaign. You know, I was thinking either single player or maybe eventually some sort of co-op mode. So purely procedural would be awesome for that. For a multiplayer 1v1 mode, though, not so much. You don't want it to be procedural because well, it overcomplicates things. For one, getting the unit AI to know where the enemy base is reliably every time and not having weird issues with that. We want the layout to be the same. So this time, now that we're going for manually crafted environments, and I'll bring that up again, even though I showed it earlier on the stream, just because Puntax, you're here. But so this is the layout for the map, and we want it to be a very specific designed layout. However, the buildings themselves, they can we can use some procedural tools for the creation of these buildings. Uh, so speeding up the design process. So rather than manually building out each building just by placing these assets, like if we were to look over at our cyberpunk city again, and we were to go with our WA and drop that in. Wow, the scale of these is monstrously huge, hilarious. So I'm gonna drop that and go 0.25. So rather than me sitting here and hand decorating this entire environment, I thought it would be cool to have some tools. Yeah, and he totally did not snap those to the grid, which is irritating when level artists do that. Anyways, this is the problem with buying assets on the store. You don't know what the training is of the artist. Things not snapping to the grid is the devil when it comes to level design. But yeah, so rather than me hand creating every one of these buildings, I thought it would be much easier if we could create some tools. So that's what I'm going to be working on in the next while. So yeah, I'm gonna probably end the stream here. Do some research to look into using splines. So spline to set the shape of the building. So for example, like this one here, I could just draw a spline for the shape there, and then that would lay out, the floor of the building, and then use that loop trick to set the number of floors. Sorry, that would define the shape of the building, and then using for loops to set the number of floors, I think would give us the fastest results. And then looking into figuring out how I would cap a roof on top of it. But yeah, so thank you very much for joining the stream and for watching. And I'm not sure the regularity of the schedule right now for this. I don't want to do a stream when I don't really have any useful content to show. I thought today, having just a quick bit of code for procedurally placing the meshes would at least be somewhat interesting. Whereas yesterday it was mostly just me playing around inside of the editor and looking at all the different assets that I had purchased on the marketplace, and then trying to figure out what I could do with them. So yeah, I'm gonna try to at least show something every other day, but we'll see how it goes. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. If you haven't done so, I actually am just realizing I need to have an overlay for that, but if you haven't done so, check out the Apeirogon Games website, where you can find links to our Discord and the Steam page. So you can click on this button to wishlist on Steam. You can join us on Discord. You can subscribe to the newsletter. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, you're going to get access to the closed alpha as soon as it's available. And everyone on the Discord community is going to get access to the earliest builds that we put out. So once we've got anything that has any kind of semblance of gameplay, whether it's just walking around an environment, we're going to actually start releasing that through Steam's beta program. Just so you guys can feel like you're actually, contributing to the design of the game. Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for joining, and I will see you guys again later shortly. So, bye for now. And then I'm going to spend 10 to 20 seconds trying to figure out how to end the stream here. Okay, see you guys later.